the tremor in the chest when you hear that word applied to your own life. For George, that tremor came when he and Amal learned they were expecting not one child, but two twins. He was 56 when the news came, an age when many feel past certain thresholds, when many believe quiet, solitary rhythms are all that remain. He joked around, his friends teased him. One dinner among friends, where children were grown up and away, turned playful. They imagined what parenthood might look like for him. But at the core, there was a confession. I really didn't think at 56 that I would be the parent of twins. And when Amal told him there were two, his laugh was nervous, warm, alive. He stood there, staring at the ultrasound image, the piece of paper. "What? Two?" he said. The shock was there, the fear, because suddenly life was no longer just about him. It was about them, Ella and Alexander. He knew his life would shift. In interviews, he admitted as much. When he first heard they were coming, he said, "We are really happy and really excited. It's going to be an adventure." But adventure is both light and heavy, joyful and unpredictable. In June of 2017, Ella and Alexander entered the world. Healthy and strong. The twins were announced. Happy, healthy, and doing fine. George was overcome. His father-in-law would later describe the moment of birth as nothing short of breathtaking. Insiders said George was ecstatic, overwhelmed by gratitude, filled with joy. In the hours and the weeks that followed, he discovered something newer than his fame, something more profound. He discovered fatherhood in its rawest form, the smell of a newborn, the hush of early morning feedings, the silence broken by the soft cries of two lives depending on him. He found that love, gentle and demanding, reshaped him. George said it made him feel older, not by years, but by depth, the kind of maturity that comes only when you realize you are responsible for others in a way you've never been before. "Fatherhood has made me much older," he would say, "to change diapers, to pace the halls in the middle of the night, to cradle a tiny hand, to look down and see a mix of Amal and himself in their faces." These were moments that no script or award could prepare him for. In those nights, tired beyond description, he admitted he cried. "I cry 4 times a day right now because I'm so tired." He laughed because what else can you do? And then tears, because love that big often comes anchored with fear, with vulnerability. He looked in mirror sometimes, still George Clooney the actor, but also George Clooney the father, shoulders slightly stooped by responsibility, eyes more tender, voice softer when speaking of home. What he feared most was this, that he might fail them, that the world's gaze, the relentless glare of cameras, expectations, comparisons, would dim what was pure, what was new in their lives. George and Amal made a decision not because the world told them to, but because their hearts demanded it. They chose different rhythms. They chose privacy. They chose raising Ella and Alexander somewhere quieter. They wanted their children not to be famous. They wanted them to be grounded, to know what it is to disconnect, to live outside spotlight, to understand that the world cares, but not everything demands performance. His old life, flashy, public, intense, some of it he dearly loved. But now it filled him less. He saw beauty in quiet mornings, twins waking up, sunlight through windows, Amal's laughter in kitchen, tiny footsteps, even the chaos of a spilled bottle. He recognized that the simple things, the lullaby, the first coo, The wonder in a baby's wide eyes, these were the threads that stitched his heart back together in ways he had never known possible. 1 year after their birth, George spoke of the moment when everything finally felt real. Not the pregnancy, not the ultrasound, not the anticipation, but that instant in the delivery room. None of it is real until all of a sudden they're standing there covered in slime and crying. You're like, wait a minute, what is that? We were just 2 and now we're 4. Everything changes pretty quickly. That moment shattered the boundaries between who he was and who he hoped to become. Fear gave way to awe. Doubt gave way to resolve. Sleepless nights became lessons in patience. Diaper duty, feeding, rocking, consoling, it all became sacred. Being a parent also exposed him to a humility he cherished. He admitted that when you have twins, raising them the same way, giving them the same boundaries, you see how different they already are. How individuality cannot be forced. Ella and Alexander, while sharing the same start, diverge in every laugh, every preference, every personality. He said, "Twins tell you a lot. You try to give them some boundaries, but they're just different human beings." George began to realize that much of life isn't about the grandeur of what others see. It's about the quiet power of what others don't. It's the first time he understood that love is less about applause and more about persistence, less about spotlight and more about presence. It's about being there when no one is watching, when the infants wail, or when they smile in their sleep, or when they wake up just because they know you're near. He spoke of the nights when the house is still and 2 tiny breaths fill the darkness, when exhaustion weighs heavily on his limbs, yet despite the ache, he feels a profound gratitude. He's grateful for Amal, for her strength, for the way she holds both babies, for her gentleness. He's grateful for his own parents who taught him love, presence, humility. He's grateful for the way Ella and Alexander have already changed him, made him more tender, more cautious, more kind. Fatherhood demanded from him a surrender, not of his dreams, but of parts of himself. The parts that believed image was paramount. The parts that believed that solitude was enough. The parts that thought adventure was only wild nights and scripts. Now he understood adventure in the lullabies, in stepping over tiny socks, in reading a bedtime story, in being up at dawn. He worried, will they know safety? Will they know love that doesn't depend on approvals? Will they know joy that doesn't require an audience? He would spend nights imagining their futures, the things they'd do, the people they'd become, the ways they would surprise him. And sometimes he allows himself to imagine their world without him realizing the fragile gift of presence, of being part of a life. There were tears of joy, of fear, of wonder. He cried when he held them for the first time. He cried many other times, born from exhaustion, from pride, from the overwhelming knowledge that he is now charged with shaping hearts that will one day shape their own worlds. Every diaper changed, every smile, every midnight feed, it all felt like part of something vast and sacred. Yet he also laughed, because twins bring chaos and humor. He learned that grace sometimes arrives disguised as chaos. When one twin peed on him while he was asleep, when both woke at once at midnight, when he tried to calm them, only to realize the calming lullaby was his own heart beating fast. These are the memories that burn. George admitted that his life before scripts, premieres, public recognition taught him discipline, to perform, to give. But none of that prepared him for this. None of that taught him how deeply a parent can love, more than anything. How vulnerable you become. How fear and hope entwined grow. how your desires now dwell in someone else's laughter, someone else's safety. Over time, he began to see the blessing in the balance. He became protective, not in a controlling way, but with fierce love. He walked more softly. He listened more. He paused, choosing roles not just for himself, but for what they meant to his family. He measured time differently. Weekends mattered more. Quiet dinners mattered. Family vacations mattered. The stories he tells himself changed. Instead of what film am I making next, the question shifted quietly to, did I laugh with my kids today? The transformation was not sudden, but unfolding, a slow-burning sunrise. George Clooney, who once reveled in the glare of cameras, found himself stirred by something more enduring, love in its ordinary moments. He found that fatherhood is not a destination, but a passage. Every day launched him into places he had never visited: joy, fatigue, fear, humility, awe. He would sometimes say, "Suddenly, you're responsible for other people," which is terrifying. And he meant it. For every moment of pride, there was a whisper of doubt, a worry that he would falter, but also a belief that those children, Ella and Alexander, were his greatest work. The years since their birth brought changes visible and invisible. His schedule shifted, his priorities redefined. He sought peace over praise. He sought presence over applause. He built not just films and roles, but memories, first steps, first words, laughter, scraped knees, bedtime stories. These are the roles no award can win. And in those small moments, he discovered that a man can be both famous and fathered, both admired and humbled. That vulnerability can be strength. That love is the greatest adventure of all. When George looks at Ella and Alexander now, he does not see reflections of himself alone. He sees them two separate souls. He sees Amal's gentleness, his own mischief. He sees wonder. He sees hope. He sees the gift he has always whispered for, but never asked for. Every night as he tucks them in, as he presses a kiss to their foreheads, as he watches them drift into dreams, he feels tears. Not sadness, but awe, gratitude, love that breaks and rebuilds. Because in becoming their father, he found what was missing. And in this new life, George Clooney discovered that to give love, to protect love, to nurture love, is not weakness. It is courage. And courage, he learned, is found at home.